Well, I mean, that's the whole symbolism of the actual smile, right? Is that
Yeah,
everybody wears a facade. So there's this idea that even somebody who's just wearing that fake smile on the
yeah.
outside, you never know what's going on the inside.
Welcome to the podcast, Kristy. I'm so excited about today's episode.
I am too.
We are doing a new category, essentially, a new type of analysis. Whereas traditionally we do film analysis, now we are going to do our versus segment. So what
Yeah.
we're doing is we're taking two films that are in a similar genre and have a similar approach, and we are going to compare the two, see what works, what doesn't, or the approaches that they took. So I want to talk about Smile. What do you want to talk about?
So we're going to do a comparison or versus to It Follows.
It Follows. So Smile
Yes.
versus It Follows. I love this. So we've got essentially two creatures, supernatural creatures, entities following around a hopeless central character. So
Mhm.
I will give log lines just so that we can have a quick go-to for anybody who hasn't seen it yet. All right, are you ready?
Yep, let's do it.
All right, I'm going to do the log line for Smile. After witnessing a bizarre traumatic incident involving a patient, Dr. Rose Cotter starts experiencing frightening occurrences that she can't explain. Rose must confront her troubling past in order to survive and escape her horrifying new reality. Now, do you have the logline for It Follows?
A young woman is followed by an unknown supernatural force after a sexual encounter.
That's it. That's the logline. You nailed it.
Oh, pow.
Ow. All right. So, I love Smile.
I did too.
I've never seen generational trauma approached that way before. And it
Yeah,
was it
yeah.
was so powerful. What are your thoughts?
On Smile?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's an interesting kind of dynamic with the generational trauma, obviously, kind of this dive into this nuance about mental health and, if those things are hereditary, if, you things carry on generation of depression and anxiety and the mental health issues that, all of us have either come across or face ourselves. So yeah, I mean, for me, that movie literally is just kind of a dive and an analysis on the state of mental health,
Absolutely.
particularly in today's society.
Absolutely. I mean, mental health is becoming more and more socially acceptable as a thing. I
Hmm.
mean, I remember when PTSD was only for vets. And you can have
Right.
PTSD just from a tough upbringing.
Sure.
Now, It Follows. Yeah, I mean, I'm from Michigan. It was filmed in Detroit, so this is
Yeah.
this is this is a local darling for us here. And it
Yeah.
is the same similar concept, but totally different.
Right. Yeah. I mean, for me, It Follows is it's really interesting since we're doing kind of a versus. So It Follows is essentially the same aspect, but the demonic entity or this creature that's following this character in It Follows, I think, is a representation of abuse, of sexual abuse, of sexual trauma,
Yeah,
and kind of coming through the eyes of a younger person in this generation of dealing with kind of sexuality today. Um, so that to me is what the messaging or kind of the thematics for It Follows is, as in comparison to Smile, which deals with mental health. So
yeah,
obviously our central character is kind of older, again, dealing with that family
established.
dynamic.
Yeah,
Yeah, kind of thing.
exactly.
So I honestly feel like it's kind of taking us the same approach, but kind of talking about two different subjects.
Absolutely. And really brilliant. What It Follows does um is using like a demonic STD, for instance, but
Right.
looking at it through your viewpoint of it is about sexual abuse of uh, teens. I mean, that
Mhm.
is really makes a lot of sense, and especially at that time when this came out, I want to say it was like 2015. What was really big then was girls getting dropped in their drinks and
Yeah.
being taken advantage of without them knowing.
Mhm.
And so that was very um, it was very topical at that time. People were starting to talk about it more.
Right.
And so I could see where this film could kind of be birthed from that.
Sure. Yeah.
Scare wise, Smile scared the crap out of me.
So, Smile does a lot of things technically in that film that make it terrifying.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
hands down. And it's not just the idea of the concept that there's this thing that's following you and you're the only one that can see it and nobody believes you, which
Right.
already just setting that premise is absolutely terrifying. But
Right.
there's just so much nuance when with Smile. And I think one of the best things about that film that we all kind of chatted about after was the sound design. Because when you're talking about mental issues and you're talking about the psyche, one of the biggest
Right.
things you can mess up your mind is how sound affects you mentally. And so
Yeah.
the sound design and everything in that film is just, yeah, there's so much great visual stuff going on as well. I mean, obviously, clearly, this idea of these people like wearing this creepy smile, which is
Right.
freaking creepy.
Right.
But yeah, there's a lot of good, terrifying jump moments in that film.
I think you're right. I think the sound design really does kind of help build that world, because it can almost be like, cliche for a character to just have a creepy clown smile, right? I mean,
Right.
that in of itself is not scary. It can actually, if it's done wrong, can come off as comical.
Sure.
So the fact that they pull it off the way they pull it off, and they keep building and twisting the scares. And I think of the fact that, like you said, she's losing her mind and no one believes her.
Right.
And the fact, and really how in society, if someone is troubled, people won't pay attention to you.
No, not
They'll
if
ignore
you're,
you. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. If you're
Yeah.
supposed to be, well, I mean, that's the whole symbolism of the actual smile, right? Is that
Yeah.
everybody wears a facade. So there's this idea that even somebody who's just wearing that fake smile on the
Yeah.
outside, you never know what's going on the inside.
A brilliant take. Brilliant,
So
brilliant take.
that's kind of, essentially nobody believing her, but ultimately her being able to see that there is more behind that smile than we all see, right?
Exactly. And I think of the moment when she's at her nephew's birthday.
Yes. Oh God, that
I mean,
that whole
that
sequence.
was a scene that sealed the deal for me. When I saw that scene, I was like, this movie is incredible. Why aren't people talking about it more? Because
Mhm.
it was a popular film, but I feel like it got buried in a bunch of other horror films that came out. Smile is incredible.
Yeah.
That scene where they're opening up their presents, and the little boy opens up the presents, and she's so excited for her nephew because she's having such a hard time, but at least she can make him happy. And now, spoilers, guys, it's the cat that she lost,
Yeah.
and the cat was murdered,
I
and
know.
it's in the box. Now, here's the crazy thing, right? I mean, that is a moment of transference of trauma. That leads
For
into the
sure.
generational trauma, which builds it in. So subplot wise, we're hitting like master level stuff. It's just absolutely brilliant.
Absolutely.
Here's the thing that was so creepy. I knew somebody who couldn't find their cat.
Oh,
Yeah.
no. What
They
happened
couldn't
to their cat?
they couldn't find their cat. They quote lost their cat. And then when Christmas came around, they went into their Christmas decorations in the basement, and they found their cat in one of the boxes where the
Oh,
ornaments were.
I hate that story. That is so
It's
horrible.
terrible, right? And I sat there for a second digesting that, going like, I mean, you didn't hear your cat screaming? Like,
Yeah. Did you not like, or did the cat like just,
yeah,
yeah,
did it just
not,
I don't know. I don't want to get into it, but I'm
oh,
thinking like that's wild. So so that whole thing when that happened, I mean, that just hit closer for me. But that being said, that scene is incredible.
that's a great sequence. And I'm glad that you said the subplot thing because afterwards there were kind of mumblings and rumors, and there still are about, is there a possible sequel in the works for that? And one of the kind of ideas that came up was how did this affect her nephew with
Yeah.
what happens not only in that sequence, but then when he's standing at the window and he's watching her in the car, and she thinks it's her sister outside the window, but he's like, what the hell's wrong with my aunt? Nobody's standing there. She's freaking out. Like,
Right. And that scene was
yeah,
crazy because she's trying to recoup. And typically in these moments, when you're writing these moments, you build, you build, you build, you have the intense moment, and then you come off
yeah,
and you kind of find a comedic moment, or you find a pause for the character to catch their breath, right?
right.
And you give it to them because you want to kind of build that emotional peak and valley with the audience and
Sure.
character
Yeah.
itself. So she's in the car, she's trying to catch her breath. Still an intense moment,
Mhm.
but she's catching her breath. And then her sister runs up, which we all expected to happen, and then her head drops.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, you got me.
That was one of
You
those jump
got
scares
me.
for you.
It was just like, that's too much. With the
Those are the
smile.
best.
Yeah, man, it was incredible. It was really
Yeah.
well done. So it follows
Mhm.
a very different approach, right?
Absolutely. So completely different in the sense that I just did a rewatch of it. And I'm remembering what I appreciated so much about it was that there's this sense of like purgatory with these characters in this journey, right? So we don't like, there's always the sense that something's off, something's not right, even in just the normal sense of like it's a normal scene and nothing's happening, but something doesn't feel right. And that's what I love that they did really well with this one, because I think again that carries into that theme or that messaging about, you know, people who are dealing with like abuse or trauma from not only the past, but maybe in their present life, or kids that are, that are carrying around STDs and doing this kind of thing.
Right.
It's like, you don't know the kid next to you has got whatever they've got,
Yeah.
kind of thing. It really kind of starts to create that world from the beginning where you're just like, okay, what's going on? Because nothing feels normal.
Yeah, the characters are almost in this like fugue-like state, like
Yeah.
this altered reality where they're, I almost kind of want to say like a Napoleon Dynamite type of approach, where in Napoleon Dynamite, you can't tell what time period it is. Is it
Right.
the 80s?
Yep.
Is it the 90s? Like, we don't know. And
Yep.
it's really similar in this one. I mean, they're playing on the TV, they're playing old commercials from the 80s, like Father and Son, which was
Mhm.
a local contracting uh, company here, and they would play those commercials in the 80s. You know, they're playing stuff like that,
Right.
which like you wouldn't see that. But then the girl has some kind of seashell e-reader slash
Slash,
mobile phone weird
which is very
thing.
modern, right? Mhm.
Yeah, which doesn't make so like none of it is lining up.
Right.
So it does create that kind of odd feeling of what is happening right now, what is going on.
For sure. Yeah. Cause you just get the sense that like they're just stuck in a, well, and again, the whole premise of that is that this entity follows you, and the entity kind of takes the shape or the form of what it might be going on in somebody's subconscious. So
Okay.
with Smile, you're dealing with this element of like everything you see has this smile.
Yeah.
That's the villain, or that's the
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 creature.
yeah,
Yeah.
the creature. In this one, it's like it's kind of what is the closest in the subconscious of somebody that it manifests into what is kind of following them and coming after them. There's this aspect that like you have to pass it on, right? It's
hmm
kind of the same with Smile. There's this element of passing it on. But if that next person doesn't pass it on and they die, it goes backwards. So you're in a loop. You're always in a loop no matter what, that it's never
Right.
ending. There's no solution. There's no
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
And that kind of lends to that whole aspect of like being in this, like again, this just lost purgatory of like you're in
Yeah.
this time loop, right?
This living nightmare.
Yeah, exactly. Like a living
Right.
nightmare.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. And so it's definitely an artistic approach that hadn't been done before. Uh the character, I found, took a while to get a little bit more active, right? She was a little bit reactive in the beginning, trying to figure out what's
Right.
going on with the monster.
Sure.
Um, and then after a while, we start to get a bit more active with it, because she's really relying on her community to support her.
To support her, which is interesting again, because you know, you're dealing with these kids or these teenagers or this age demographic that sometimes they don't like to be open and talk about what's going
Yeah.
on with them. It's taboo. It's not cool. You're
Right.
not cool. And this particular character actually does reach out to her friends and does seek out support and help instead of trying to fight it alone, which is what a lot of people juxtaposing in Smile, where she keeps saying like something's going on. She's trying to
Yeah.
communicate. Nobody
And there
believes
is
her.
no community around here.
Yeah.
It's such an interesting comparison. If anybody is out there and wants to see two really similar concepts done completely differently,
Mhm.
I think this is a great way to look at it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, just like you said, kind of different approach. Smile, I think, obviously fits the mold more of a really kind of put together, just polished, like
Yeah.
solid, terrifying horror film
Yeah.
with those aspects. And then it follows this more of a slow burn, independent kind of, kind of aspect of kind of how they approach that story.
Yeah, it follows it's polished. I mean, it's a solid film. It
Oh,
has
for
that it
sure.
has
Yeah.
that indie feel to it, which
Mhm.
I think adds to that flavor of where are we? Is this real? Is this not real? So I think
Right.
that works for it. If you try to do It Follows as like a $300 million MCU film, I'm like, this is not gonna work.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it works in this aspect. I gotta tell you, in Smile, watching her track down her trauma and face her trauma and
Mhm.
really deal with that internal conflict was so empowering, just from somebody like myself, who was diagnosed with PTSD, having to like really deal with that and watching this
Yeah.
character go through it. So um I gotta tell you, at that end when she dealt with it and she came out the other side, and you'd think like that beat the creature, right?
Sure. Right.
But she doesn't accept responsibility.
Exactly.
That's
That's
the
the
part,
thing.
I think, because I was like, "Man, she didn't do it." Because at the very end, she confronts her mother, she's talking about her trauma, but then she starts making excuses. "I was 8 years old, I was just a kid, you were mean." So she came up with all of these excuses why she let her mother die. She didn't own it.
Mhm.
And I think that's why, in my humble opinion, I mean, I didn't write the thing, I didn't direct the thing, but in my humble opinion, that's why the creature got her.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it for sure. I mean, it's the sense of kind of taking that accountability, but there's also this sense that, you know, maybe some people just can't overcome and they
Yeah,
can't fight it back, right? So
yeah, that's
even
tough.
when you're at that precipice and you feel like you've tried everything and you've got all these reasons, you give in.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the sense that I got from that.
Well, I mean, I compare that to It Follows, where cleverly I cannot remember his name. I'm gonna get you the actor's name.
Oh, the character guy though, the one that
Yeah,
she's so it's
Paul.
her name's Jay and then he's
Yeah.
Paul.
So
Yeah.
Paul, her bestie, who has had a crush on her forever, takes the leap and gets the demon STD. So
Sure. Yeah.
um now what he does cleverly is he goes and finds prostitutes.
Right.
Smart.
Smart. But then you think of the last shot of the film,
Then you think of the last shot of the film where they're holding hands and
way in the back,
somebody's following.
somebody's following. And
Yeah,
it's this idea that like
you can't get away.
are she's holding his hand.
Yeah,
So are they just going to walk this path where like they essentially just keep giving it back and forth to each other?
yeah,
Right. So the cycle never ends. Still never
yeah,
ends. Still
yeah.
out there. Yeah.
But they're together.
But they're together.
Right.
How that'll affect a relationship that started like that in the first place,
It's,
you know?
well, I think it'd be every 4 days. Every 4 days. I don't care if you're busy. You got something on the clock. Let's
We gotta
go.
switch. Yep. I mean, at
So
least they're on a schedule, I guess. I
yeah,
don't know.
I don't know. It sounds like a lot of work. So well, so this episode is brought to you by Script Summit,
Yeah.
now exclusively on Coverfly.
Yeah.
And you can go on scriptsummit.com, learn all about it. But what's really cool is the top feature this year will win a Coverfly development package, which is pretty amazing. I mean, they get you exposure to the industry. I mean, they help you
Yes.
develop, and then they can help get you out there. That's absolutely incredible. We also have ink tip Pro comes on. So Inktip will give you a Pro package. So with that, you can get your work in front of industry people. And then like, if you want to hear like a super secret, the 2 top winners will come on the Successful Screenwriter podcast
Ah,
and get interviewed and get exposure that way to a huge
yeah,
audience. So it's pretty exciting.
totally
Uh,
worth it.
yeah, scriptsummit.com. And then if you guys want to chat with us, you can always find us at the successfulscreenwriter.com in our forums, and we can hang out
Yeah,
with us there.
it's
Kristy,
awesome.
thank you so much for being with me today.
Absolutely. Anytime.